take it serious to go to the hospital for checkups. After taking all those drugs from the shop, he didn't feel good anymore. He was taken to the hospital. At the time of reaching at the hospital, it was like it had gone too bad that the doctors couldn't manage.
When you went to the chemist, you asked for malaria tablets. What made you suspect that it was malaria?
Each time that we could realize there is some kind of symptoms more than headache, we could just think it is malaria, though we were not aware, we were not sure that it was malaria.
Sasa hii kijana nilikuja kunotice shida yake akiwa na miaka 2 baada ya kuzaliwa. Kwenda kwa daktari mwenye alimfanyia alizalisha mamake, nikaambiwa ya kwamba shida ilitokea kwa kulingana na kutokea kwa kuza nini mamake wakati aliposhika mimba alikuwa na shida ya malaria.
Mama alikuwa mjamzito. Kuna wakati hata mmoja uliweza kuenda naye kwa kliniki wakati alikuwa anaenda zile check-up zake ama tu alikuwa anaenda peke yake?
Vile alikuwa anaenda clinic, mimi nilikuwa nampatia anaenda peke yake.
Kwa Dr. Otieno, maybe unaweza kutuelezea, could it be a case of prolonged labor ambayo ilifanya mtoto akawa hivyo pamoja na hiyo malaria ama ni vipi?
Malaria causes damage to the tissues around the placenta and therefore nutrients are not efficiently passed to the child. Secondly, it also interferes with the transmission of oxygen, again from the mother to the child. It could trigger preterm labor and delivery. So that could result in respiratory distress, which could cause brain damage in a newborn, which then would result in something similar to what we are seeing with this child. Vaccines have been shown to be first-class public health tools, and the examples given here, you can talk of smallpox and you can talk of polio and other diseases. By 2015, hopefully, we should have a first-generation vaccine that protects more than 50%, that has an efficacy of more than 50% against severe malaria, that is complicated malaria, and death, and whose effects can last at least 1 year. Then by 2025, the efficacy should be at least 80% with a longer term effect of at least 4 years.
What is another way of preventing or providing an intervention against malaria? Information can prevent malaria. Information often comes in the form of data, and data can mean very little to us if we don't actually have it in context. If you go to Data Dredger, one of the first slides that I think would be interesting to look at is the one on mapping malaria. We spoke earlier about where would you have to be to get malaria in Kenya. I think we've heard in the past that we've said Nyanza or Mombasa are areas that we think we should go to when we want to do a story about malaria. I want to put it forward that if it was not so well known that there is malaria in the highlands area, that could be a new area of storytelling. The general knowledge or assumption out there is that it is the small, little, vulnerable children who are at greater risk of malaria. But what does the data say? That's the only thing that will actually give us an accurate story. So let's go to the data. So we see on this infographic, school-going children have higher prevalence of malaria than preschoolers. As the children get older, there is more malaria. So I definitely assumed that the young, vulnerable babies and children are the ones who are going to have more malaria, but the data shows us the opposite. So for me, those are already the ingredients of a very good story, because a story should also be about, aha, I didn't know that, and we're not guessing, we're looking at the data.
We have a policy where we normally say, if you suspect you have malaria, please don't take anti-malaria before you are tested so that you can know whether you are being tested for malaria or not. It is geared towards ensuring people don't get treated unnecessarily if they don't have malaria. The policies which we have currently on vector control, particularly using insecticide-treated nets, is to cover people universally in those areas. And by universal coverage, we are talking about giving one net per 2 individuals. The policy change which we have is only on the insecticides which we shall be using on indoor residue house spray. And the purpose of using a different insecticides from what we are using on nets is mosquitoes which are resistant to the insecticide which is being used on net will not be resistant to the insecticides which will be used on the wall.
There are statistics that have shown that the older you become, sort of your body builds are resistant towards malaria. So with these new statistics, I mean, should we care more about the older people who are getting malaria, or focus more on this other segment that will be actually affected by malaria if they get it?
When you take care of young children and pregnant women and you leave these others, school-age children, and protected, they will actually be the source of infection. And therefore, as a matter of policy, now we have the preschool programs where we are trying to look at data to see whether if you treat children, school children, if you screen school children with rapid diagnostic test and you treat all those who are infected, are you going to have less malaria transmission in a certain area or not?
He's talked about universal coverage, having everyone sleep under a net, and universal coverage, they talk about every 2 people having 1 net. So there's this is one channel. We're only talking to the pregnant woman and child under 1. The other thing we found out, which is key for us in communications going forward, is female involvement. They are the key decision makers at the household in terms of who sleeps under a net.
This is in line with the arguments on climate change and global warming. When it comes to temperature, almost everywhere, this is what we are seeing, that they have been rising. If the temperatures are continuously below 18 degrees Celsius, that is too low for the development of both the vector and the parasite.
As you were to argue the use of existing interventions.
Our scope was with regard to the environment we live in, climate change, early warning mechanisms, and DDT.
We were looking at interventions of the future, vaccines, and new drugs.
According to KDHS, their data in 2009, 108,127 women were diagnosed with malaria in 2012.
There are 28 million Kenyans who live in areas where there is risk of contracting malaria.
Only 53.4% of pregnant women slept under nets in Coast Province, and 62.9% pregnant women slept under net in Nyanza Province. And these are the 2 provinces that we usually know are endemic areas. If we go even deeper into, did they sleep under treated mosquito nets? Now the number even goes lower, and yet these are the people who are at risk.
Up to this moment, we don't have any vaccine to help in the treatment or control of malaria. There are several vaccines that are being worked on right now, but in Kenya today, there is one that has reached the 3rd stage.
Occasionally, we have heavy rains pounding all over the place, and this may lead to the transmission of malaria in that there are several water bodies that are trapped, and the runoff may actually make certain eggs to be transported from one region to another.
Women who were not educated, only 33.1% of them took the antimalarial drugs. But those who had secondary education plus, it was 49.4%.
The efficacy and effectiveness of DDT has been proven. When sprayed on the roof as well as the walls, it has an effect of between 6 to 12 months.
The parasite becomes resistant to some of the drugs that are available. And so for that case, it means that there is a need for continuous research to be able to find out, to get new drugs to help in the treatment of malaria.
The winners, and it's mostly because at least what they didn't know, they didn't bring up, is the climate change people.
We hope that the real fever out there in Kenya will reduce. In other words, that there'll be less malaria in Kenya through the role of journalists. In our new health project, which will be there for the next 4 years, called Health Media Project, malaria as a health concern is also a theme that we'll be able to give attention to from our side, so that you can give attention to it in terms of your audiences needing more information about malaria.